Good afternoon. Social media is fundamentally changing the way that we do business. It's also changing the way that we interact as well on a social standpoint. And we're really just at the beginning of this change. And as we're at the beginning, there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly what's the overall outcome going to be. How do I take advantage of this change? And what I'm here to talk about today is two fundamental pieces. One is what are the trends behind the changes, and how does that impact us as individuals and our companies? And then the second component of that is going to be how does that impact us from an advertising standpoint or as marketers, and how can I utilize this best within the company? Now, some major fundamental shifts are taking place. And Thomas Malone is a professor at MIT. He's been writing about this for some time, well over a decade. And one of the things that he believes is there's going to be a fundamental shift between the information being kept within the company to decentralized, and then more individuals are taking responsibility for that information and the dissemination of the information, and that information needs to flow from outside in and not just be contained. Now, some of the changes that are taking place that help facilitate this is the communication vehicles. And one of the things about it is, communication is becoming much cheaper now, and it's also allowing us greater access to information. So if we go back thousands of years to recent, few hundreds of years, then typically we only had a scope of influence or were able to hear about other ideas or information from the people who were immediately around us, right? And then there was the advent of more technology with broadcasting, whether it be print, radio, or television, and that gave a few people the ability to stand out and have their message heard. But we only had a few number of people who were really influencers at that time. And as wave of the internet have come, and then especially with social media on top of that, what we're seeing is that individuals can now stand out. They now have their own voice, and essentially everybody becomes a publisher. And so what are the implications of that? And this is really what the whole social media reform is all about, is everybody now is an individual with a voice, with an opinion that can be heard by everybody around the world. And it's quite disruptive in many ways. It's quite powerful at the same time, too. So how do you harness that? And so if you look, back in 2002, then these are the big companies, all still around today and doing very well, that were the dominant force of, way information was exchanged online. But we're seeing the disruption of social media taking place really in two environments. So entertainment and in business. And with the advent of Facebook and MySpace, LinkedIn from a business standpoint, and now Twitter as well, we're seeing that disruption happen even more and more. And so how do you capture that, and what's the overall impacts? For one, I'll talk to you a little bit. I'm going to focus mainly on business and not really around the entertainment aspect. But at LinkedIn, when Reid Hoffman founded us back in 2002, then he had this vision of how do you connect the world's professionals? And by connecting them with trusted relationships and providing them a better access to collaborate and exchange ideas and information, you therefore make them more productive. And by making them more productive, more successful. And as an individual, if you become more successful, that helps the overall company as well. And there's some great knock-on effects to that too. And so how can we figure out, what other things are impacting this? And for one, as Thomas Friedman, a great author and really forward thinker in this field, he says, the world is becoming flat. We like to say everybody's becoming on a much more equal footing. We can compete based on our knowledge and our information. And as Thomas says, people are collaborating more on an equal footing. Now the impacts, or some of the impacts of this is now information is speeding up, the world's becoming more faster, decisions happen more quickly, and it's also becoming a much more challenging space for us to live in. So how do we combat that, or how do we harness that? One of the things that we believe at LinkedIn is that everybody is now an entrepreneur. Right? So there's the entrepreneurial spirit, not just of starting your own company, but maybe taking that new initiative within your company, finding a new job or whatever it may be. And we need to look at the world in that particular way. Now, here are some stats where you can see that, the tenure of people in a job is declining. So how many people have been in a job now for more than 13 years? Same job, nobody. How about 6 years? Okay, so again, more of the minority here. And what we're seeing is that there is a fundamental change, is that people are their own entrepreneurs, people are moving much more quickly, then the job tenure is declining. And with the whole global economy as the way it is, then people are competing more or more loyal around their job skills than they are to an individual company. And we see this even in Japan, where the typical person was almost in a job for life. Now at a 30-year-old, they have an average of 3 jobs in Japan, which was unheard of 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so as we think of ourselves as an entrepreneur or a small business, each of us as individuals, then let's take a step over and we see, as companies, we understand how to manage brands. We know about our revenue, our unique selling propositions, business listings. You always want to make sure you have a listing on Google if you're selling anything at all. Or take it to the old days of, you had something in the yellow pages. And we know what we have to have as a great R&D team, sales, marketing, finance, PR. So what does that mean for me as an individual now that I'm taking responsibility for myself?